What have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned building a business from the ground up?
That question brings so many scenarios to mind. And the main thing that I'm thinking of right now is there was a video of a young Mark Cuban, great entrepreneur. And he said oftentimes, because of his success, people will ask him, what did it take to create a great business, to scale your business? And he said, people always think I'm going to come up with some mousetrap, type connection as far as how, right, to gain customers, or some whiz bang idea. He said, really, it boils down to customers. And then he took it a step further, and that you have to have happy customers. So for me in this industry, it is all relationship based. So I've always had to make sure that not only are my customers present and I'm marketing to them, they know about me, but then once I'm able to secure their business, I have to keep them happy.
And what are some of those ways that you nurture those relationships? Because I agree with you 100%. When it comes to developing strong relationships with clients or referrals, it's almost like a craft. Like you get better with it over time. What have been some of those strategies or methods that you've commonly started using and practicing in your own practice?
So I always like to make sure I know the reason behind someone coming to a closing. And being in this industry, you don't want to make assumptions. So sometimes a person is in a closing because they're simply upgrading from a smaller home to a bigger home. Sometimes they are before me because maybe they lost a loved one and now they're having to downsize or move to another state. Sometimes it's joyous, sometimes it's a more solemn occasion. So maintaining that communication with my clients so that I can deliver on what is going to be best for that particular signer on that particular day. So that's always been a strength for me that my clients appreciate, because they get that feedback. Oh, this person, they were so nervous about this closing. It was the final step that they didn't really feel like taking for this life change, but they said how warm you made them feel or how patient you were with them. You stepped out of the room and allowed them to cry because this was a really sad occasion. But just being in tune with my signer and picking up on body cues and languages and things like that, that allows me to be able to be the best that I can in that situation. And that turns into more business.
100%. I think energy plays such a huge part in the success of any individual. So for anyone watching that hears the word closing, how would you define what a closer does? Because you own Paragon Closers, and for a lot of people, they don't even know what that means.
Right.
How would you define that in kind of maybe like a fourth grade level, in the most simplest way possible?
So when you meet with your realtor or your loan officer and you secure money to purchase a house, before you get the keys, you have to execute all of the paperwork. And myself or someone on my team is that individual that you meet with on your path to getting those keys.
So it's almost like the person that is in the middle. Like they're the representative for the client.
Correct.
Got it. And I think that there's power in knowledge. And I think that the more that, because a lot of people avoid the process of buying a home because of the fear of feeling, I don't even know where to start. What advice would you give to somebody, whether it's somebody that's looking to start the journey of investing in properties or maybe purchasing their first home? Like, where would you say, you know what, just start here?
So I would tell them to tap into their network, because this is such a monumental decision. And it's going to be a lot of information that you're having to disclose as far as your taxes and what you do and how you made that money and where did it come from, things like that. You're needing to express so much to someone, you want to feel comfortable with that person. So even when it's a realtor, you're going to spend a lot of time with that individual and shopping and walking through homes and touring them and assessing. And you want a good person that can represent your style, also that can be on the lookout for things that fit into your category to jump on it. The loan officer is going to make sure that you secure the money to obtain that home. So allowing yourself to tap into your network of someone that can refer you to an all-star realtor or an all-star loan officer is going to do you well, as opposed to just going online and filling out an arbitrary application with the company. You've never met that person. You don't really have a relationship with them. And while relationships can be built pretty quickly, you can avoid that awkward phase or feeling like maybe this person isn't having my best interest in the way that I would like without them having a full knowledge about you. So I would definitely recommend to tap into your network.
You know, what's interesting too is when I hear you describe that, it's almost similar to the reason why a lot of times people that, honestly, my personal opinion, I think everybody should have at least once in their life a conversation with a therapist, you know, because I think that conversation, if it's a good therapist, is so monumental to your own growth and development journey. And I think that for a lot of people that may be not in the market to buy a house, so they may not be searching for a real estate agent, but I think that that mindset also applies. Like when you're looking for a therapist, just because one didn't work doesn't mean you should stop there. So the reason that I brought that up is because I think a lot of people know how to kind of, for themselves, start to figure out if somebody's a right fit for them as a therapist. But like, how would somebody, what are the cues that people look for when it's like looking for a real estate agent to help them on that journey, on like probably one of the biggest purchasing decisions of their life? Like what advice can you give in your journey? What was that person, what was that profile or that, personality that you were searching for? Was it experience? Was it availability? Like, how do people start that kind of filtering process?
So, of course, you want it to be the one-on-one experience because that's the most important, because that's how you're interacting with that person. And typically we make a lot of decisions based off how a person makes us feel. So that's going to be quite important. But the other that's just as equally important is how connected that person is. So whether you're working with, if in your case we're talking about a realtor, you want someone that is well connected in their industry with being able to recommend you to different service offerings. So let's say you're a seller and you have a home that you're getting ready to put on the market. A good realtor is going to assess everything. Maybe there's some repairs that are not that costly to you, that if you completed them before you list your home, you might be able to get more value on that listing. But having a good realtor that can refer you, oh, I have an HVAC guy, or I have a roofer that can assess this, as opposed to just a person that is strictly a realtor. If they don't have a good connection base, then it's going to leave you feeling a little empty-handed because you're going to have to fill in the gaps and do that on your own. But if you have a person that's well connected, that will just save you a lot of headache because they'll be able to steer you in the right direction.
Because I heard you say network, and I know a lot of people will say, oh yeah, I have a strong network, but there's also that group of people that maybe not, they don't have as strong as a network.
Exactly.
So where does a closer come into the picture? Because I think most people have heard of a real estate agent. Most people have heard of a mortgage. But in their minds, they're probably thinking, do I need to hire a closer? Do I need to search for, like, when does that happen?
That is a great question. We are definitely behind the scenes and less known in this industry. So the closer is typically hired by the title company. So if you are a buyer or a seller of commercial or residential property, more than likely your realtor is the one connecting you to the title company. So these are not steps you have to take on your own. The title company compensates the closer 100%. So none of that financial burden rests with the buyer or the seller.
And for anyone watching that doesn't know what a title company is, how would you define that?
So a title company is a third party that's there to keep everyone honest. So the buyer's real estate agent and then the seller's real estate agent, often called a listing agent or a selling agent on the other side, they will present the deal to the title company. The earnest money that you place as a deposit on the property, that goes to the title company. So they hold everything, make sure that the numbers match. If there's any payoffs, they make sure to obtain actual numbers, not, oh, I think I owe 80,000 on this home. Well, they get the actual numbers so that when everyone comes to close, these are numbers that were verified, the ownership of the person that claims to be the seller, they've been validated as the rightful seller so that it's an honest transaction across the board.
So is the title company kind of like the enforcer? Like they're policing the process?
Correct.
Got it.
That would be a great word.
Got it. So you know what's interesting is I think real estate has become such a big part of pop culture with shows on Netflix like Selling Sunset, a lot of YouTube channels that are popping up, touring luxurious homes.
Right.
I just had a conversation with an artist and we had the conversation about how a lot of collectors are property developers, homeowners. How have you, as somebody that is in the real estate space, seen this as a, like, whether it's a positive shift for you, or is it helped at all, or is it kind of made things a little bit more challenging?
So having more individuals, you're stating,
Like more
like more
spotlight.
eyes on the industry.
Because it's starting to become very glamorized. And I think that it's always had some sort of allure to it.
Definitely.
But I think now with luxury playing such a major component, I would assume that there is an influx of people that are now wanting to get into the industry. So there could be pros to that. There can also be some challenges that come with that, because when, in marketing, everybody thinks that because they own a camera that they're now a marketer, so it's like, it could put a little bit more or create a little bit more work for marketers, because when somebody's burned by somebody that they call themselves a marketer, but it's not actually a skilled or trained or natural born marketer, it can cause hesitation for potential relationships in the future for real agencies, by those clients that have been burned. So has that same kind of trajectory started to impact, or have you noticed it in the real estate space?
So with the things that you just mentioned, with the industry becoming very glamorized, also with the pandemic, because there was so much real estate activity, you had an influx of realtors, loan officers, closers, everything related to real estate. People were in droves into this industry. And it was a positive in that the volume was there and those people were absolutely needed. Now, there were those that may not have been as well versed, but because it was so much work, we needed as many people as possible across the board. So when things start to slow down, that's when those that were new and just kind of came into it because it was the hottest thing right now. If you didn't have your network, and I know I keep coming back to this word, but if your network was not strong prior to the pandemic, a lot of them went by the wayside because they didn't have the business anymore. At one point, there was just business for everybody. But once you had to rely on your relationships, once the interest rates went up, that was a different shift. So I would say the positive was that it allowed for it took the pressure off of a lot because you're able to spread things out. But later, when you're looking for a more seasoned person, because that's when companies started caring more, again, about the customer experience.
Yeah.
Because the workflow was lower. So now everything you had, it needed to be
It was
buttoned
no
up.
longer quantity, it was quality.
Correct. So from my perspective, with my team is always handpicked. So whether you're new, whether you're seasoned, that part is not so much the important piece to me. It's how well you interact with people and what you bring. So I think the con, answering your question, is there were those that didn't factor that. It was just, this is a way to make money. And so they got into it. But this industry, it will let you know very quickly if your relationships that you have with companies are not strong.
And if you're good at what you do.
Right.
You had mentioned your team. I think being a business owner, there is a level of or requirement of being a talent scout. Because I think that as you start to develop in your own skill set, you also start to notice not just the need, but also that skill set or that skill or that trait in other individuals. How do you, in your practice, recognize that, or how do you cultivate it, and how do you do it in a way that it's scalable? Because I think that that's a common benchmark for a lot of businesses, because I think that once they get to a point where they're not able to replicate or duplicate their process on a larger scale,
yes,
it makes it almost impossible to grow that business model, and it could be an incredible business model.
Right.
How do you in your business practice that and go about seeking new talent, and what do you look for when you're building your team?
So the very first qualifier, again, this is not based on how long you've been in this industry, whether you've just recently was certified or you obtained your certification many years ago, is your personality. This industry, there are so many factors when you walk into a conference room. You have clients that you can see, and then there are unseen clients as well.
What does that mean?
And they all have to be satisfied with your services. So as a closer, your client is the realtor that could be at that closing, the loan officer that may be at that closing. The title company is very rarely at the closing because you're not always at their office when you're closing. Sometimes there's the brokerage firm as well. That there are lots of factors behind the scenes of people that you're trying to impress that you may not be directly in front of, but you still have to do that. So that's why that personality is such a big piece, because you have to have a warm spirit about yourself. You have to care about people. This is a big decision that people are making. And so if you are a person that, we all have a measure of what we do that is perfunctory to us, but it's brand new to someone else. So when we go into a closing, we can't give off the idea to someone, or we can't give off a feeling to someone that I do this all day, and you're just another number of, like you're closing number 5 today. I don't hire someone that gives off that impression. So I always focus on their personality and just the type of vibe that they give off. And then next, when it comes to the technical pieces, I can train you on that. But I cannot train you to have a genuine disposition about yourself and smile and be approachable and make someone feel that you really care. So the soft skills that a person needs to come with, that I focus on, but the hard technical skills I can teach. So those are not as big of a deal for me because I can always mold someone into that.
How do you approach fear and uncertainty in moments, especially when the stakes are pretty high?
So that immediately makes me think of an artist and a particular song that Detroiters know very well. And that
Can I take a guess?
I'm sorry?
Can I take a guess?
Yes.
Is it Eminem?
It is. It is. So when you have that moment, you have to take your shot. And you better not let it blow. Like you have to hit it. And in this industry, every closing that we have,
I have the song playing in, I'm like, I have it in my head, the song playing. But yeah, you're very
and
right.
it's in my mind. And it's really when I drive to a closing, from the moment I get out of the car, those first steps in the parking lot, you're already making an impression whether you know it. People are in the conference room looking outside in the parking lot, watching you walk in. So there's always a concert going on in my head of, okay, we're going in here and this is what we're going to do. So closings, you get one chance. And I mean one chance to get it right. So there's so many factors involved. There's making sure that if you have sellers, making sure sometimes sellers are closing on a property 10 a.m. in the morning and they're purchasing another property at 3 p.m. that afternoon. So that 10 a.m. closing, it has to be flawless. So I have to make sure that the buyers, that their funding, if there's funding conditions, that the funding is approved by their lender, making sure that there are no missed signatures on any of the documents, and that the seller's proceeds, usually if they're buying a home that afternoon, it needs to be wired to the other title company. So all of that takes time. And so my one moment at 10 a.m. affects things that are happening that afternoon. So just making sure that whether it's me or someone on my team, making sure that they feel well supported to reach those goals that we have for that closing so that the next one is not affected by it.
It sounds like there's a lot of precision and organization involved to be successful in your profession. What do you practice, implement in order to keep everything structured in a way? And this can be either software, this can be apps, this can be just your own routine. How do you keep things in order?
So everything has to go on my calendar. If it's not on the calendar, I will not remember where I'm supposed to be or where my closer in Ohio or Colorado or Texas is supposed to be that day.
Which calendar do you use?
So there's really two calendars. So personally on my phone that's with me at all times, I use a Google environment. And then for my industry, there's a platform that I use to where all of my clients can log in, book their closings, and that in itself has its own internal calendar.
What is that called?
So that software, it's designed from a company called Notary Dash. Her name is Jennifer Garland. And that software I use in order to, it's white labeled. So my clients don't see Notary Dash, they just see Paragon Closers. But that platform is what we use so that they can input all of their details, the closing date, the time, the location, the signers that will be attending the closing.
What are some of the pros of that software compared to Google Calendar? Because I myself also use Google Calendar. What are some of the things that you can do in that software that you cannot do in Google Calendar?
Well, first, that software is created by a closer. So Jennifer Garland herself, being a closer, started her own company and then took it a step further and created this software for other signing service owners to utilize. So it's strictly focused to my industry. So even though it has a calendar function, there's other pieces that a title company is going to appreciate and that a closer that's being assigned the file, they appreciate because it coordinates with their own Google Calendar or whatever calendar they're using if it's Outlook. So when I am assigning a file to a closer, once they receive it, they can then add it to their personal calendar on their phone or their laptop of whatever they're using. So it's very intuitive with other services.
So the communication styles, I'm sure, very customized to the industry. So like the confirmation emails and all of that. Got it.
And all those things happen simultaneously.
That makes a lot of sense. So do you add notes into your Google Calendar, like for each specific, like how thorough do you get?
Very, very granular. And the reason for that is I'm big on communication. And understanding why a person is at their closing allows me and my team to shine even greater. So the note section I like to use for my closers when my clients let me know this person, this is the reason why they're there.
Like private notes. Got it.
You know, they're a first-time buyer, or the buyer is extremely nervous, or they have anxiety, you know, things like that. I let my closers know because it shifts your approach. Same for myself when there are closings that I still personally handle. So when my title company or my realtor lets me know, hey, my signer, they're feeling this way or that way, or it's a divorce closing and the sellers are once were husband and wife to each other. If I find out from my realtor that, hey, they really cannot stand each other, then I need to have them in separate closings.
Wow.
Or I may offer to stagger the closings so that they don't have to be in the building at the same time. But these are all notes that are occurring in the background, so that whether, again, if it's myself or a closer on my team, so that we can adjust and still deliver a great experience.
That is so cool, because those are the things that most people wouldn't think about, but you have to think about in order to be successful.
Yes.
So how do you handle setbacks in your profession? Because everything is so hyper-focused on detail and organization and relationships. I'm sure that and this is in every industry, there are times where something doesn't go as you had hoped it would go, or how you planned for it to go.
Right.
How do you handle those moments, and what do you do to get the most out of that experience in terms of like learning lessons or life lessons?
So I would not get over some of the setbacks that I've incurred over the years if I did not have these two mentors in my life. So one of my mentors is based in this industry and has been doing this a very long time. Their signing service is on a much grander scale than mine. His name is Mark Wills. And
Is he based in Michigan?
He is based in California.
Got it.
The loan signing system. And I discovered Mark, this was about 7 years ago. And he's been an excellent mentor over the years. And there's just been certain things that as you're progressing that I've never encountered, but he has in this industry, and has been able to steer me in certain directions, so that I can overcome those things. And then my father is my other mentor just as it relates to business overall. He was the first businessman that I knew of as a kid. I didn't know it at the time, but as I continued getting older and I started wanting to become an entrepreneur myself, it was modeled after a lot of his trainings. And even to this day, when there are unique situations that occur, that is my very first phone call.
Really?
Yes.
And what profession was your father? What industry?
So he was in banking.
Okay. What is I guess first I want to ask you, what has been the best advice that you received from your father in business?
Take the emotions out of it. And he always specified that with me, because I am a female, and just by nature we tend to have more emotions, and we can get lost in words and being overly verbal at times. And my father just always preached that you have to take the emotions out, because in business, sometimes people make decisions that you were not anticipating them to make. Sometimes people, they just generally surprise you. And your reaction to that, the go-to move can't be tears all the time. Or sometimes turning it into an emotional outburst is not the best maneuver either. And sometimes logic is the only way to react. And you just have to state the facts of the incident, or the facts of whatever the situation is. And so that's always been a great piece that he's provided, and I still go by that today.
I couldn't agree anymore. I think emotions often drive people the wrong way. you know. What has been the best piece of advice that you received from your mentor from California? What's his name again?
Mark Wills.
Mark Wills. What has been the best piece of advice from him?
So the advice from Mark is focus on the signer's experience. In this industry, closers will think because they're certified, because they know the loan officer or that title company is in their city, just random pieces of data, they think they should be their go-to person and that they should give them business. But really, Mark flips it. Instead of focusing on what someone should be giving to your business, you make sure that when you get the business that you give what they need. So we always focus on the person that we're meeting with, because like I said, in closings, you have unseen clients as well, because loan officers are not always at the closing. The realtors are not always there. Sometimes it's only you and that signer. And if it's only you and that signer, you have to make sure that signer has a great experience, because they are going to be questioned how that closing was. Their loan officer is going to ask them. Their realtor is going to ask them. And when they give that feedback, that's going to get back to your title company as it relates to, oh, well, Paragon Closers did that closing, or Jennifer, or Michelle, Steve. How did they do?
Typically, how long does a closing last on average?
About 30 minutes.
About 30 minutes. And when you prep for a meeting, how do you prepare for? I mean, obviously, there's all the information that you have to have ready for the closing, but how do you prepare mentally for the meeting? Like, what do you tell yourself? Obviously, we know that you listen to Eminem.
Yes.
But is there a sequence of steps that you kind of check off in your head in order to kind of ensure not only is it a smooth and timely process, but then also they enjoyed interacting with me?
So the technical aspect I go through, because for every closing, there's a different set of parameters that are required. So the most simplest, if it's a refinance, it's truly just you and that signer, and we're executing documents. They may or may not have closing costs that I need to collect. So that's the most basic type of a closing. But if it's a purchase closing, whether I'm meeting with just the seller or just the buyer, or sometimes I'm doing both sides. So I have a conference room, I have the signers, the sellers on one side of the table, the buyers on one side, agents for both parties, and then I may have a loan officer there. So some closings, there's a large volume of people. And then for those types of closings, I have a longer checklist of things that I can't miss. So those are going in my mind when I'm assigned a file, because I have to make sure, if I'm not the one doing it, if someone else is, that I'm making sure we go over that checklist. And then again, we were talking about knowing the reason why that person is in that closing. That also can affect how our approach is to that closing to make sure that they have a great experience.
And the way that they feel, because you mentioned that the title company may call them after, the agent may call them after. I would assume for you that with each positive closing, it is a setup for another opportunity.
It is.
So, because that kind of takes me to my next question, because I think for any professional that is in a B2B space, meaning a business to business space, it's different. The approach to marketing is not the same as B2C, business to consumer, because when it comes to business to consumer, there's a lot more consumers than there are businesses. So you have a wider net in order to kind of make mistakes. But in business, we have this kind of mindset that if we mess up with this select group of people in our market or in our community, we're in trouble, So how do you go about developing relationships with title companies, with agents, with mortgage professionals? What strategies, what methods, what practices do you implement? And then how do you nurture those relationships so that they keep coming back to you?
So one thing that when you were just mentioning as far as that last closing, that is an opening the door for more business. So the mentor, Mark, has stated, you're only as good as your last closing. So even though I may have done 200 closings for a title company, that last one is the one they're going to remember the most. So I try and always duplicate that positive experience that they receive, that positive feedback that they receive from the realtor or that loan officer. That is a big component of making sure that the business does continue. And then a step above that, I always like to show gratitude. So my whole business model, and that's also what I teach others, is to operate from a spirit of gratitude, because there are so many title companies, there are so many realtors, loan officers, they can give their business to anyone. There's also lots of closers. It's a very competitive industry, and that's why those relationships are so important. So I really try and make sure that that last closing that's in a person's memory, that it was the best one. And then the next one after that, that was the best one. So we always strive to give a great experience. The name of my business is called Paragon Closers. That word Paragon means a pattern of excellence. So I train everyone, and it's my own personal motto, that every closing we're just giving another pattern of excellence to our end user. So that signer, they feel that way, and everyone else that was involved. By showing gratitude, I will often cater different events for our title clients, loan officers. They're at their desk, especially loan officers and title processors. They are at their desk a lot. They're on their phones a lot. Lunch is sometimes a foreign word to those in that industry. So bringing lunch, there are times where I have had a candy bar, and I may come in like at 3:00, on a Friday or a Thursday. It's the end of the week. It's crunch mode. And I just present that. That way they all can just go up when they want to. Those are things that stays in the back of their mind. Like, not only those in the industry will call me JC. So not only is JC, wow, her team is reliable, but they even think about the little things, keeping us happy and smiling in the office. So those are the ways where I try and massage those relationships.
It goes such a long way. The way you make people feel has such a huge impact on how they see, feel, and perceive you, And I think that when you can think about the things that they don't expect you to think about, it really does open up this other door in their mind of, I don't just see you as somebody that I'm doing business with. I kind of like, they start to see you as like a friend, an extension of their team, an extension like of their family. And I think that in business, it's a very, it's been practiced for forever. Like relationships are just the bread and like, like in marketing, we say word of mouth is the best marketing, because we can, both understand this phrase, because when we grew up, we used the toothpaste that our parents bought, and we trusted our parents. And so we trusted this toothpaste. We didn't grow up doing research on what's in this toothpaste, like it's just the transfer of trust, So I think that the more that you practice and strengthen those relationships, a lot of people would be surprised to see what comes from it. And it's like, and I have to always emphasize and reiterate, like, don't do something with the expectation of what I'm going to get out of it. It really, like, and I'm not saying be naive, like, do your due diligence and pay attention to what what's happening. Like, if you scratch someone's back and scratch someone's back and scratch, and they don't ever extend their hand to scratch yours, maybe that's not the best relationship for you to keep putting, what do they say? Your ducks in a basket, like, to stop putting so many ducks in that basket, because you really have to see it as a strategy. You have to see it as like, and that's why I say, like, it's a very fine line. Like, I don't meet with or have conversations with friends or potential clients just to see what it gets out of me. A lot of times if I meet with somebody and it's like, I just don't think that I would be able to give them what they need, then it's like, I'm just being honest with you. Like, I want to see you succeed.
Right.
I don't think that I'm the right person for you to do that. But I have some people that I think would be a better fit. And that's what I think people pay attention. Like, they notice that. The same way they notice if like you care about whether they had lunch, that matters to them. But I think it also matters when you think more than what you're expected about somebody.
Yes.
You know, I think it really does go a long way. I could imagine too that not every situation's perfect. And, you know, I've had experiences too where, you know, kind of high stress situations where the clients have just not been the easiest to work with. How do you handle those situations, and what advice would you give to somebody that when they're faced with that scenario for the first time in their entrepreneurial journey, like how do you get out of it stronger?
There have been closings to where there have been cultural clashes, there have been husband and wife clashes, there have just been disgruntled individuals. There's been lots of explicatives that have flown across the table. And in those moments, I look at it as this person is having a really bad day, but it has nothing to do with Jennifer. I'm here to make sure that they can get to whatever the next step is in their life that they're trying to achieve. And thinking with that mindset, because it's easy when you hear explicatives going across the table and you're in a professional setting to get flustered.
How often does that happen?
It's not often, but I've had it happen enough to where it's not shocking when it does happen.
Wow.
I'll put it like that. Yes.
That makes sense because it is, at the end of the day, a family, like a real life living family with real life problems.
Right.
It's not just a business.
No.
It's real life.
No. I've had siblings arguing at closings because, there may have been a death and they were the beneficiaries and now they're arguing about percentages and splits and things like that. Those things typically happen prior to the closing. They already know because the lawyer has deemed it so or whatever the will stated, but they still bring that to the closing and they're not happy with their 35% or their 50%. They felt it should be different. So again, in those moments, I just have to not take it personal, but then also that conference room is my domain. I have to make sure that things flow. We may not like each other. The seller may not like the buyer or my sellers might not like each other. But at the end, we still have a common goal. And that is to make sure that all of these documents are executed and that we satisfy the lender if there's a lender involved in the transaction. So that's always just been my approach, is to focus on getting what we needed to accomplish completed.
What has been one of the craziest experiences in one of your closing appointments or meetings that you've encountered that you could share that would bring insight or some perspective on not every situation goes perfectly, but you can overcome it too?
So I had a seller who seemed very comfortable with the transaction at the onset. I was very friendly. He was, my buyers, everyone was in a good mood. The agents as well. And I presented a document that is called an occupancy escrow. And what that means is if you are the owner of a home and you're selling that home, but you need more time to stay in that property beyond the closing date, then you and the buyers would agree upon a certain amount of days, and then usually there's a dollar value. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's occupancy at a zero rate per day, but you still have to vacate by maybe 15 days out or 30 days out, whatever is agreed upon. This particular seller became irate because he claimed he was not aware of the value of his occupancy. So then explicatives were being exchanged one-sided. So only the seller is expressing his indignation about this occupancy that is refundable, but he didn't allow me or his agent to speak. So he's just vomiting his
Emotions.
frustrations. And it was silence. Everyone else at the table was silent. His agent tried, but he wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise. There are other situations, but that one is the most memorable because it just happened not that long ago.
Does that ever affect the perception of any of the professionals at the table in regards to the representative of that individual?
It can, because if a person comes to the closing and they state, I didn't know X, Y, and Z, it makes you look at
Unprepared.
the realtor or the loan officer because, well, yes, you did know because they should have told you this. But people get amnesia at odd times. Again, it's a big deal. So their loan officer or realtor could have very well informed them of something. But in a closing room, some people are not in conference rooms daily like me. So it's just second nature. But when you come into a conference room, you have all of these eyeballs looking back at you. It can feel intimidating. And maybe their recall is not working as well that day. And you get situations such as the man that decided to kind of lose himself at the table.
You know, and there is a lot of emotions in everyday life. I think that one of the things that people often forget as an entrepreneur, it can, and people have heard the term entrepreneurship is very lonely. But I think that you have to learn how to become productive even in times when emotions and stress can feel so overpowering. How do you approach that? How do you approach as an entrepreneur and advise to your own team to manage when you have a situation like that where somebody becomes so irate and it affects you, and it could, for some people, cause them to become more affected by it than others? How do you recommend to anyone on your team or an entrepreneur to manage those emotions, those experiences in a way that is healthy, that allows you to continue on and not let them set you back?
Right. So you have to make sure that your network of people that you rely on is solid. So whether that's a mentor that you have, whether it's a trusted friend, sometimes that trusted friend is a fellow colleague in the industry that fully understands the industry, and you don't have to explain, well, A and B happen and then C, because they already get it. But it's not good to keep all of that bottled in. So it does need to be expressed outwardly. So I know for me, that is a big help for me, is just to discuss it. But a lot of those situations that, that are kind of unique as far as someone losing themselves in the moment, they roll off for me because I compartmentalize very well. So I realize that that is just that particular person's feeling at the moment. But then there are other cases where if it's back to back, and then it can become excessive, and I do need to discuss it with somebody.
Yeah, it's never it's never you. It's they're going through something. And I feel like that's something that I had to kind of coach myself about. That you've mentioned earlier that your father gave you advice about never taking anything personal. And I think that ties in so perfectly to this, because when you're first getting started, it's very easy to take things personal because your business is your baby.
Right.
So if somebody were to say something negative about your child, how are you just going to be like, no big deal,
Right.
it becomes very, like I said, easy for things to become personal. But I think that is such great advice, because the better you get at reminding yourself that, how you said, they were having a bad day. There was something that was going on in their life that you don't know. That could have been some real serious stuff.
Right.
Right.
So
I think it's so important to always remind ourselves of that, and just, being a little bit more thoughtful about other, people's situations in life. And I see it. Your poise, your calmness is very, it reflects, and it also is something that I would assume that a lot of your clients appreciate a lot about you, because I think buying a house is stress on a whole nother level. So it goes a long way to be able to bring down that stress a little bit.
Yes.
So other than relationships, like, what have you found to be effective for you as an owner of a closing company in regards of developing new relationships, acquiring new business? Like, what tangible things can you give to anyone listening about, whether they're starting their own company, whether they're, getting into the industry themselves?
Mm-hmm.
What have you found throughout your journey and your experience, and what are you learning and discovering now to be very effective for you?
So, consistency. When a person hires your company or contracts work out to your company, they're going off of what you presented initially.
Mm.
And it's very important not to waver from that initial offering, because that's what makes you lose business, or it's hard for you to retain the business that you started with. I know for me, there are clients, I've been in this industry just under 10 years. I have clients that I've been working with the same amount of time because I've been consistent. The same way I closed many years ago, and giving the care, concern, being adaptable has been a big deal. Those things, by remaining consistent, that keeps your business, that keeps those that you contract your business with to continue working with you, because it gives them peace of mind. Typically, business owners, when they are searching for new vendors, to secure things for their business, they're focused on the quality or the pricing. So sometimes the pricing is more important to them, and they'll take the lower price in order to get what they need done, but the quality is not the same.
I call that opportunity costs, because I think that a lot of times people make decisions to save money, which ultimately ends up costing them more money in the long run.
It does. And we saw that a lot. And just to speak on a vague basis, there are certain closers that work with certain companies, and those closers are not as detailed. They don't have.
Do your clients tell you this? Do they say, like, "Wow, you are one of the most detailed professionals that I've worked"? Like, does it? Because I would assume, like, for me, I think everybody does how I do it, but then that's one of the things that you learn is, like, wow, not everybody is thorough. Not everybody is as innovative. Not everybody is as detailed oriented as you are. And it's something that you just assume is the common trait.
Right.
But those things that make you special are the things that separate you and make your clients want to work with you, as opposed to another company or another professional.
Well, I like that you brought that up, because there's a loan officer. For a period of time, he was the #1 loan officer in the state of Michigan. So naturally, that means he had a lot of business. And I did closings for him. It's a very small outfit at the time. I did closings for him with one title company. He absolutely loved my closing style. But my closing style, what he let me know is it produced more business for him. And he always likened it to a chef. in a restaurant. He said, JC, I can have this steak and I'm preparing it so well in the back and I have plated it perfectly. He said, but then if my waiter or waitress presents it and they're disheveled or they're in a bad mood or they're rushing or, they just don't deliver it in the way that I envision, that can totally shift the way that guest leaves his restaurant. Oh, the steak was good, but so now the focus is not on the steak, it's on the experience. And he said, I know that when I send JC to a closing, that all the work that I've done to get that person to close with my brokerage firm, get them to the closing table, that JC is going to leave them smiling. They're going to refer me to their neighbors, to their friends, their family. That equates to more work.
I'm curious because I think in any industry, when you're great at what you do and you're, building a team, and I know that there's things that you can train people, but there's things that, just like how you were mentioned, personality and like how they treat people, those are things that they just have to have
right
naturally. How do you ensure that everyone on your team, or is it even possible to deliver the same experience that you do? How do you measure that?
So that is an excellent question. And I had to think about that myself because I had spent so much time building up my business based off of me. And I can control everything when it's me. But once you start expanding, well, now I'm not at the closing table. So what I do is after every closing that my closers facilitate, so whether that's here in the state of Michigan, whether that's in Colorado, Virginia, there is a phone call that's made to the signer, usually about 10 to 15 minutes after the closer leaves.
And that's phone calls from you to...
Correct.
Got it.
To the signer to ask them, those quality assurance questions. Was the closer on time? Did they give you a good experience? Is there any feedback that you have for us? And that, I've not had anyone give me any negative feedback, but that's the only way to measure it when you're not there. I've also used it as an opportunity to allow that particular signer to beef up my client's Google page. So when I ask those questions and I'm stating, I sent my signer Linda to your home and she facilitated your refinance, how did that experience go? And when they're giving all of their accolades to Linda, oh, that is so great to hear, Mr. Such and Such. Would you mind going to the Google page and listing your review? Oh, sure. Well, now they want to do that because they had such a great experience. And then someone's calling afterwards to confirm that they had a great experience. They don't mind sharing it.
So they're leaving a Google review on the title company? Or?
Yes.
Got it.
So that is, again, how we always focus on the signer's experience. So it's really not about us.
And even more value, because what you're doing is you're helping their algorithm by and for anyone that doesn't know this, the more Google reviews that you have, positive Google reviews, the higher you start to elevate in the natural search rankings, So I think that you're not just providing a positive experience, you're also helping them get discovered more.
Exactly.
Is that something that is a common practice, or is that something that you started practicing that you saw as a opportunity?
It is not a common practice. This is something that I implemented in my business model in order to assist my clients in choosing Paragon Closers and also deciding to stay with Paragon Closers.
That's so cool.
Thank you.
But it's so cool because it's often the things that we forget. Like, you basically do a survey after every single call, which I feel like I never get surveys anymore. You know what I mean? But it's like, if I were to go get a coffee and then I get a text message saying like, how was the taste? How was the quality?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Simple. Like, they already have my trust, because I've purchased something. I think that is genius. And I think that it is such an undervalued strategy.
Thank you
you know?
very much. Thank you. I've gotten really great feedback on that. Um, and it's twofold because it also allows us, if there were any issues, because sometimes a person can have an issue, but it had nothing to do with the closer. It's, I told the closer that I wanted to have my proceeds wired, but I would actually like them mailed. Or it could be the other way around. You know, I told the closer when they were here, I wanted my proceeds mailed. I forgot we're going out of town. We're going to be away for a month, and I really would like those funds to be wired. That allows me to get on the phone with my title client. I can have them e-sign that they're shifting the manner in which they would like their proceeds. So again, it still allows us to give a 5-star service, but it also helps my title client look great as well, because that's a phone call that signer, they don't have to figure out who to call or who to email. We've taken care of that right away.
So in your profession, and I would assume that it is the same for real estate agents, mortgage brokers, there's a ton of different brokerages that this is a common practice. Accessibility and availability at pretty much all hours of the day.
Yes.
Do you have like a set frame where you are not available to pick up a call? Like, how do you set that up in a way where you're able to say, I'm checking out at this time? Or are you not even in that mental space of like, I'm checked in all the time? How do you approach that?
So you likened a business to a baby, and a baby does not always sleep when the parents sleep. They're not always hungry just because the parents are having a meal at that time. So for me, my business is my baby, and it may need a closing at 10 o'clock at night as opposed to normal 10 a.m. And I've had that occur to where there's been a closing. Hey, this person, they work this particular shift. They need to close at their home at 10 p.m. Perfect. I'm on it. I will speak with my signer. Sometimes I may, depending on if it's a male or a female, that's where these other factors come into play, that I may get a male for that closing instead, that feels comfortable, and that just keeps things on a peaceful level for everyone going into it. But for me, my phone is always on. It's always near me. That way, if anyone on my team, they need support, or if my clients do, there are times where they have a last minute closing that comes in. Maybe somebody on their team forgot to book it. It needs to be done, but it was not on their schedule. It wasn't on ours. Being available for that and being able to pivot quickly, that's the other benefit that title clients have when they work with us. I have loan officers that, hey, I have this deal squared away. Title, they can't get anybody. Can you? And they'll just come to me directly. Or, hey, I have a closing set for tomorrow. The wife is going out of town on an emergency trip, but she was on the documents. Can you come over and do this POA for them? It might be 8 o'clock at night. I'm on my way. So I always keep that phone available. I'm accessible and able to help clear out any problems or requests that come up.
I think it's so true. I think as an entrepreneur, that's one thing that aspiring entrepreneurs don't want to give up is their time.
Right.
Without even realizing that some of the biggest, most successful entrepreneurs in the world that, you know, you would think check out at a certain time or on the beach or, you know, on vacation all year round, they're on calls all hours of the day. You know, it's like there is no, and that's one of the things I really want for our generation to really understand, that there is no time frame for growth. There is no limitation on, you know, because I think that sometimes people used to make me feel bad when I first got started. Like, you work too much. Oh my God, it's 8 o'clock at night and you're still work. Like, you know, like that's the culture that we grew up in, and thinking that we are available from 9 to 5 and that's it.
Right.
But imagine if you could increase the bandwidth of the duration of time that you can grow and develop in your skill set, and then at the same time be accessible and available for somebody that is in need of your service or your product, because you're right, you never know when somebody's like, emergency plumbers are a thing. There's a reason that exists, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
I think that, you know, when you call a police officer, when you call a fire department, like there is no I don't know. I don't believe in like that things should close earlier, this or that. I understand that it's different for every industry, but I think that when it comes to entrepreneurship, like you have the final say on whether you want to be available at 10 o'clock at night, but you also have to understand that there is another entrepreneur that is willing to be available at 10 o'clock at night that might get the opportunity that you passed up on.
And
So,
that's a big deal. Doing what others won't do
mhm,
has propelled my business over the years.
mhm. So how do you approach balance? Because I think that, you know, off the topic of availability, you also have to make time for yourself. Like, how do
Mhm.
you practice balance as a professional, as a business owner, as a friend, a colleague, like, you know, all the other roles that you play? How do you find balance in your career?
So, over the years, being in this industry, you learn those busy times, the busy times of the month, the busy times of the year. And, I will take my vacation strategically because I know that the summer in this industry, it flies by, and we're still in the thick of it. So taking my vacations in December, January, February, I try and do it then
How long
because
is your vacation?
I'm sorry,
How long do you take for vacation?
you said how long?
Mm-hmm.
Like duration?
Mm-hmm.
Usually a week.
That's so interesting that you
Mhm.
say that, because I feel like workaholics, we consider a week a vacation. You know what I
It
mean?
is. I
Like
mean,
I just
but
talked
my
to him.
phone is always
Yeah,
with me.
like I just met with my dad for lunch earlier today, and he was like, "I'm going on he's a workaholic.
Oh, more than you.
He is
Okay.
67 and he
Okay.
works all the time, but
Okay.
he's so great at what he does. And
Aw.
recently he told me, he's like, "Yeah, we're going on vacation." I was like, "Oh, nice. Where are you going?" He's like, "Cancun." I'm like, "Oh," so I'm like, 2 weeks. He's like, "We're going for a week." I'm like, like that's not a
That's enough.
vacation. But it's true. Like I think as producers, creators, it's such a interesting dynamic and relationship when we
Mhm.
look at time off.
Right.
Because even when we're off the off the clock, so to speak, our minds don't,
We're not.
our
Yeah.
minds don't take a vacation. That it's such a interesting topic. So when you do take a week vacation,
Mhm.
like how do you escape from?
So it's funny because oftentimes I am just changing my environment. So instead of me being here in Michigan,
Mhm.
I might be on a beach in Florida,
So
but
your
my cell
office,
signal still works.
yeah. So your office changed.
Right. So, um, it's hard to just completely pull out because, again, my business has been built on that person's experience and then also doing what others won't do.
Hmm.
And that has been in different ways that I've been able to show my clients, that they can rely on me, whether that's, after hours, whether it's going above and beyond, husband and wife, one is at work, one is at home. Don't worry about it. I'll go meet with the wife at home and I'll go to the husband's workplace. We'll still get all of the signed. Rate lock expires today. It has to be signed today. Just doing those things to where they didn't ask me, but I will solve their problem for them.
Hmm.
And sometimes I have to solve their problems on the beach. And I gladly will do that.
I mean, of course, if somebody said, "Hey, I'm in Cancun," nope, I'll be right there. No problem.
Right.
So, for inspiring entrepreneurs, inspiring professionals, up and coming, what's one piece of advice if you were to go into a time machine and be sent back 10 years and could only take one piece of business advice that you've acquired
Back.
back with you? What would that one piece of advice be that you take?
Well, the funny thought is if I could go back, it would be Google, Google, Google.
Mm. Oh, are you saying like buy Google Ads?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
um, but one piece of advice that I would take, and I'm trying to narrow it down to one because there's so many things cycling through my mind right now. But business is, whether it's this industry in real estate or anything else, there's just always that competitive nature to it. So going out there and actually giving your best on the first try, I mean, don't hold back of what your offerings are. Or if you have in this case, just liking it to my industry, if you have a closing and it's a refinance and you're at a signer's home, and in your mind as a closer, like, oh, I don't really have to dress up for this, or oh, I don't really have to be as bubbly because there's nobody to impress. It's just the signer.
Mm.
But those are the very closings to where I have walked into a person's home and they've been on the executive board of a lending company. So they've been on the executive board of Rocket, or they've been on the executive board or part owner of UWM. So I have had closings where you have no idea who you're meeting with. So whether it's a one-on-one closing, whether it's in a conference room, still give that same punch of service, no matter what. You don't know who's related to whom, who has ownership, levels and stakes in different companies. So just always, give your best on that first try.
Such great advice. I think that like you said, you never know who you're reaching and at what time.
Right.
I think it's plays such a big part in your practice on staying open-minded of what could potentially come from every single experience.
Absolutely.
Because I think that God's timing is never wrong, and I think that sometimes when you didn't think that, like, oh, well, this is just a simple thing, it could be the thing that changes everything, so
Right.
I agree with you. I
Right.
think being ready and always staying ready is such a great piece of advice for entrepreneurship. I'm curious, you had mentioned Google.
Mm-hmm.
Share with me your mindset on that. Like, would you run more ads early? Like, because that we haven't touched on that. We haven't talked about your digital strategy. Like,
Right.
what would you tell yourself 5-10 years ago to start doing? And then also, how do you approach it now today in 2024?
So I would have started a Google page right when I first got into this
And you
industry.
mean like a Google business profile?
Correct.
Got it.
And there have been many times where I would finish a closing and the signer would be so impressed, or the realtor, I've never had a closer like you before. Where can I leave a review? I didn't have anywhere for them to leave a review. So I turned that into a positive, and I would always tell realtors, the signers, whether buyer, seller, hey, if you felt that you had a great experience today, please feel free to let your loan officer know, or please feel free to let your realtor know. That small comment turned so much business my direction, because then I had clients who, that might have been the loan officer. JC, what are you doing out there? I have never had this much feedback about a closer before. My clients are saying, oh yeah, JC was our closer. She was great. She did this. She said this. I didn't have a Google page, so no one, if you Googled my name, it would look like I was a novice in the industry because I didn't have one. But I don't necessarily regret not having one back then, because those verbal reviews that those signers gave to their realtors or to the loan officers, or realtors provided to the title company, that's what propelled my growth.
That's so cool. So what about today? Like, obviously, I'm assuming you have a Google business profile today. You don't?
I don't, but so right now I have been way more focused on the social media aspect of things. So my personality, I can be a bit more shy, definitely camera shy. So for the longest on my social media, I didn't really show my face or show like closings and how the experiences went. I just was giving like little tidbits and facts about being a notary, which can be quite boring and engagement wouldn't be very high.
But I do want to say that and I have this conversation all the time.
Okay.
Because I'm able to see it from a different perspective because I have this conversation with so many different types of industries and professional levels that they often feel like who's going to want to watch? Like, that's boring. Like, you never, like how we just said, you never know who's going to see what you said documented on camera and when they're going to see it.
Okay.
It could be a student. It can be somebody in the industry that is looking to partner with you or a possible referral. Like, you never know. I think that people prefer people over textbooks. They like to learn from people more than they do from textbooks. And I'm not saying that it's kind of like, for me, I don't like to read books. I like to listen to books, but we all go to school, and what do? We sit in front of a professor. We don't go to school and open up a book and just sit there. I'm not saying that doesn't ever happen.
Right.
But I'm saying the ability to learn on a different level hits different when there's somebody that has lived what they're teaching you. So I think when people get in front of a camera, and the reason I feel that people have this feeling about this, like, who's going to care? Because people are still focused on the vanity metrics of social media, meaning I only got 5 likes, or I only got 20 views, or I only got 3, 4, 500 followers. That doesn't, especially today, it does not matter. The only thing that matters is consistently putting out information. If you're somebody that's not like, I'm not somebody that's creative, I'm not somebody that likes to dance on camera, or I'm not somebody that is very funny, but your thing is information, like information, like documenting information and putting it out. Like, it may take 2 years for one video that you shared to reach somebody that has such a powerful position to be able to make a decision that changes your life forever. You know what I mean? So I think that one piece of advice I would give to anybody that is in an industry where they feel it is uninteresting, it's maybe uninteresting to that person, or they may think that not other people would be interested. But I lean into creating for your people, not for the people that you don't see as your people. So what other marketing strategies do you practice currently today?
So using social media in a greater way. So again, before it was, and social media has changed over the years as well too. So that's another factor. But I now do videos where I'm trying to either interview someone to ask them how their signing experience was, or I might be asking a realtor their feedback on how they just observed me conduct, how they felt that it went. And those little comments for a title company, because now my reach is in a different direction now. Whereas before it was, if I had a Google page, it would have been about finding me and only Jennifer. Whereas now, I want my title clients, I can actually show them, as opposed to them just reading on a Google page. They can see, hey, I know that realtor, or I work with that loan officer all the time, and this is what they said about Jennifer and her team.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It just gives a stronger impact of compelling someone to want to work with Paragon.
Think about in the music sense, how many of artists you discovered because they were featured on another artist that you enjoy.
Correct.
Like, I remember when Beyonce and Shakira did a song a long time ago. I'm sure that there were a lot of people, a lot of hip hop fans that did not know who Shakira was.
Yes.
But let's fast forward to 2024. Shakira performed at the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
like that song came out, I want to say over a decade ago. I don't know exactly when it came out, but it had to have been over a decade. So that's exactly what I mean. It's like another reason that I do this podcast is because I like to bring value to my audience, yes, but at the same time, what I'm doing is I'm on camera developing a relationship, and that relationship grows into the guests sharing information about their expertise. And then somebody that follows me or somebody that follows you may learn about me through following you, or somebody that follows me may learn about you through following me.
Right.
I don't know if I said that twice, but I'm not going to. But do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, honestly, I think you should have a podcast called Closing the Deal. And then inviting your target clientele to your podcast, sitting down with them, because what better way to break the wall than having a conversation that people say, yes, I'm going to come meet you and say, because the reason people come to sit down and on camera, because they understand that I'm not just having a conversation at a coffee shop where nobody's going to see it.
Right.
I'm having a conversation where she shares it. And then if you add them on as a collaborator, it goes to their platform. And then somebody from your audience finds him or her. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes more of a strategic decision.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I think that that's definitely something you should try a podcast at some point.
And I respect your wisdom, so I will process that, Ralph. Thank you.
And if it's called Closing the Deal, I want it to have a little named by Ralph Perez. I'm just kidding. It doesn't have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But Jennifer, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom, your experience.
Thank you.
You coming to share your story with me on this platform. It means a lot to me.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, Ralph.
Thank you.